So, hi everybody, it's Pam, recovery champion at CGL, the West Lothian Recovery Service. Welcome to the next instalment of the Red Talks. So, this is our recovery education discussion, where we had thought of this idea as a team at the hub. Obviously, we were wanting to do this in the hub, but obviously with current circumstances as they are, we're no longer able to do that. So we have decided to move everything online. So the Red Talks was an idea that we wanted to have people with inspiring recovery journeys come and share their experience with you all. And today we have Kevin Neary. So, hi Kev.
Hi Pam.
Hiya, thanks very much for agreeing to come and do this for us. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, really good. Yeah, life's okay, so yeah, today.
So, Kevin, for those that you don't know, Kevin, I've known you for a number of years now. But to give a bit of background to Kevin, you're one of the founding members of Aid and Abet, which is an organisation that helps prisoners transition from prison back into society. You're a speaker on many things, including addiction, recovery, childhood trauma, offending behaviour. At the moment, you currently work in partnership with Police Scotland on early intervention and prevention. I know you've done many things in your recovery, so we'll give you the forum, the platform to talk about that in this, if you like. So we've got a number of questions for you, Kev, and I think the first one that we'll start off with for people that are not aware of who you are is, you know, can you tell us a wee bit about what brought you into recovery and how you found it, you know?
Yeah, I think what brought me into recovery was years addiction behaviour. So it wasn't a kind of straight walk into recovery. You know, just to give you a kind of picture where I was in life and what led up to me actually seeking recovery, and that point where, you know, that I was looking for change. You know, so let me tell you that as a wee boy growing up, I came to a large family, and as a wee boy back in the 70s, you know, life was difficult for many families in Scotland, unemployment and stuff like that. So there was a lot of stress on the family, and a lot of stuff within that environment would have an impact on me. So unemployment, and you know, parents struggling to bring up 9 kids. It was really difficult for them at the time. You know, there was alcohol surrounding the house. There was domestics going on. You know, it was really difficult for my parents bringing 9 people up, 9 kids up. So for me, what I realised today, which I'll hit on, but I didn't know then, because it's normal, so it's happening, is I didn't realise that the impact to others' behaviour, the environment I lived in, was all having an impact on me, having an impact on my brain development. I didn't know that. So while I was going through school, for instance, I'd be in the classroom and you know, and I felt constantly nervous, felt not part of the classroom. Teachers would be, you know, passing books around for people to read, and I'd be terrified to read the book because I couldn't read. I couldn't take the information in. No matter what a teacher says to me, I just couldn't filter that information. What I didn't realise is that my prefrontal cortex in my brain wasn't developing properly due to stress as a child stress. I didn't know that at the time. And so what I would be doing is to escape from that when I was in the class and I was going to have to read a book, or, you know, my behaviour would change. And my behaviour would be to just disrupt the classroom. And if I disrupt the classroom or do anything, I'd be either kicked out the classroom. By that time, I got the belt, you know, so teacher would use a belt, they would belt you, that, but at least it distracted me if you hadn't to read. And so that was the journey. Teachers then thought that I was never interested, sat me back in the classroom, or excluded me from the classroom. So that was that for as many years as I can remember. So I hated school, I hated rules, you know, by the time I went to secondary school, you know, my behaviour was still going off the wall at times because I just couldn't take any information in. I was always accused of daydreaming. You're daydreaming, but it was me taking myself away. You know, and at school I always wanted to be everybody else. Everybody else, I wanted to be somebody else, but not me. You know, and all that went along like that. And I didn't realise that their behaviours was a form of communication. I didn't realise at that time that because I didn't have the esteem and the ability to say, Miss, I'm struggling to read. I never really heard what you said there. Miss, I'm struggling with this. And I didn't have that ability. So, like, I was acting out my communication to the teachers through behaviour. And they didn't know that. I didn't know that at the time, but it's a survival skill, fight, flight, or freeze. You know, and I was fighting through school. So, you know, by the time I was removed to school, let's say, I was 14, 15 years old. I'm on the street, nothing's happening in my life. I'm starting to drink at that age. And then that's a journey that starts. And so within 6 years of that time, I've been drinking and taking prescription pills and smoking dope, and that journey was going on. I was end up in the criminal justice system. I was in Pullman Young Offenders at 17, returned back again at 18 and 19. And you know, time I'm 21, I'm in an adult prison, and my use of substances is increasing, and my behaviour is getting even worse. And again, I think at the age of 21, support came to me, and people in recovery had came because of behaviour, the way I responded one night while drinking. They just knew that there was this Jekyll and Hyde character, there was this nice guy, Kev, but when he took a substance, he became this nutcase. And you know, these people tried to get me help, and that fell on deaf ears for me. I just, again, just like school, I was just taking in what people were telling me that recovery was there for me. And so that was me. And then, you know, and just to fast forward on that, that led into years later into heroin addiction, crack cocaine addiction, class A drugs. But what I didn't know, what I know today, is I was using substances to self-soothe the emotional pain and turmoil that was happening within me. But at that time, I don't know that. I don't know it, but you know, I've been to various places at 21, 26. You know, while I was in prison, I took CBT courses, relapse prevention, self-management recovery training. I took all that stuff in prison, and then I actually came off methadone in prison. I done absolutely brilliant. Family were all delighted. Came out of prison and relapsed within 3 days, back into the same cycle, the same stuff, and no realising the stresses coming out of prison, try to work back in, integrate back into society, take on the pressures of life, because, you know, in prison, all my needs were met. I had breakfast, lunch, dinner every day. My clothes were washed for me, I had no rent to pay, I had a TV, I had all the stuff that for living was in prison for me. And when I was released, I had to find all that, which became stressful again and caused a lot of internal turmoil, which then resulted that I had to soothe that emotional pain, going back to substances again. So I really wanted, so I'd let everybody down. Another time, many times, I burnt bridges and tried to rebuild them and burnt them down again. And it took one day when I went to the recovery hub in Bathgate to actually get a flat, because I was homeless and living here and there. And I went in there, and the intentions of getting a flat for housing, when I saw signs for recovery, pictures for recovery, and I thought, you know what, I'll give that a bash. I know I tried it in the past, but these were more kind of glamorous pictures and more emphasising the walls about recovery. And so I asked to speak to somebody, and they brought in a guy, John Klusker, who worked for the Serenians Recovery Hub at the time. And John Klusker, who I didn't know, came and spoke to me. And he did me an interview like most people, and he asked about my substance use and what I'd been using. And it was all the same sort of repetitive questions that anybody would ask you. But drug diaries and what you're using, what substances, how often do you use, and I kind of thought, you know what, this means nothing to me. I've had this before and it doesn't work. And I went to leave the room, and when John asked me to come back, you know, and he was kind of begging me to come back and just listen to him for a couple of minutes. and I returned back and I sat down in the chair, and John looked at me and he said, Kevin, you know, I'm a key worker. I'm here to support and help you. I work in an environment where I have professional boundaries. And what I'm about to tell you is going to breach the boundaries. But I'm willing to do it because you need help. And I didn't know what a boundary was. So he said, I'm a recovering heroin addict. And at that moment, it was like bang, and they got me. And to hear that, and to hear that this guy had been in addiction and he'd been recovered and he's now a key worker, that was enough to hold me there. And then, so you know what, even at that time, he knew he had me, but he wanted to really convince me. And what he'd done is he pulled his phone out and he gets a picture up and he says, do you know who that guy is there? And I looked at the picture in the phone and I was like, about 10, 15 years ago, I used to score for a house and he used to open the door to me. And he said, that's me. And that was enough, because I couldn't identify the guy sitting in front of me and who was in this picture. And John then, supported, cared for me, showed me what it was like to be compassionate, showed me empathy. I didn't know any of these words and what they meant, but what he done is he demonstrated that towards me and countless others. As a guy who had lived experience of addiction and experience of recovery, and he slowly introduced me to certain recovery meetings, fellowship meetings in West Lothian. He took me through to Edinburgh. It took him 2 years to convince me to go to a rehab because I was so resistant, because I thought I could do it all myself. So it took a while. And you know what, Pam? I went into rehab and came out of there. And as you mentioned, once I came out of rehab, for me, going into rehab and then going into recovery and into the fellowships within these places, like prison, I got CBT, self-managed recovery training, relapse prevention, cognitive skills. They were tools I didn't know how to use when I got to prison. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a what they call in recovery, a sponsor. I didn't have anybody supporting me when I came to prison. So hence why I relapsed. Nobody was there to sharpen the tools. But I went into recovery, the fellowship, and I was introduced to a 12-step recovery program. However, I was gave somebody who could take me through my apprenticeship to use the tools of the 12-step recovery program alongside the CBT, and I brought everything all together. And that's what our recovery program was for me, and to get to recovery was to get tools of how I deal with behaviour, how I deal with me. And so after doing that work, for what I didn't know is what was happening internally in me was a problem. And I've soothed that emotional pain with substances. So that journey led to me realising my experience of coming out of prison, relapsing, going back to jail. Everything came back to behaviour. I had addictive behaviour, how I dealt with life, how I self-regulated my emotions. I wasn't good at self-regulating. I would just lose control. So what the programs of recovery and 12 steps and all the other tools that I would be good taught me through a practice and a daily practice on how do I deal with me rather than try to deal with what's happening externally with me. And that journey led to me getting involved as being one of the co-founders of the charity Aid and Abet, slowly based on what would happen in our lives when coming to prison. So we wanted to prevent the revolving door of people returning back to prison. And it was about looking at our own experience, what was missing for each one of us when we went to jail. And it was that getting picked up at the gate. I had many dreams and many visions of changing my life. And with 100 metres of leaving prison, I'd either have a bottle of Buckfast, strip of Valium. As quick as the dream was gone, the 100-metre dream, that's how long that dream lasted, for 100 metres, and then it was gone. And I was back in the jungle, back in the chaos, and all I needed was just somebody to be there. And we recognised that, not just myself, but other guys who were part of the founding Aid and Abet. We then looked at all these issues that came up for us, and we put that in place. And that was a gate pickup, the 72 hours I talk about. We support guys who are that first vital 72 hours. We are no psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists of that. We know who they are. We know where they are. Our job as mentors is to get guys to these proper services, like yourselves, where you provide services for people. Our job is to be a bridge to services for people who have lost their self-esteem, their self-worth, their confidence, and we're by their side over that time. And that's evolved. If you mentioned about the Please Scotland project, which I'm a guy who just hated authority. prison staff, police, social workers, teachers. It was all about relationships. I broke down every relationship in my life because I didn't understand me. So when it came to working with police, I was an absolute no way am I working with police, because I was conditioned. But when I went to the Police Scotland project, I saw a different side to police, and I saw police working towards helping young people and preventing them going into the criminal justice system. So aiding and abetting, picking people up who have been in the system for years, coming out, and we're trying to integrate them back into society. We're trying to get them to return their lives about and reduce the harm of drug use, reduce their offending behaviour, and it was all about reducing, and it was all about reducing what was taking them back into addiction, or the amount of drugs they were using on the street, or could be getting a prescription. But the Police Scotland project, this was about preventing young people going into addiction, preventing young people going to coma in offenders institution, preventing young people going into mental health. Because my experience in prison is when I first went to prison, it was full of criminals, and the last time I went to prison, it was full of mental health, and I was one of them. So, I see how it's evolved and the pressures of life. And so that's been the journey to where I am now, which has it has been a really wonderful journey, but it's had its ups and downs.
That's life, eh?
Yeah.
And to jump back a wee bit, Kev, so when you were saying as well, about the 2 years that you spent resisting against rehab, and you were trying to do it on your own, like, what were the kind of things that you were trying to do to be in recovery, stay in recovery? What were the things that you were trying to do while you were on your own?
The 2 years when I met John in the recovery hub, I got involved in the activities, relaxation and stuff we were doing, and we were doing different types of courses. There was this enthusiasm. I'm on a prescription. I'm not using illicit drugs. But what the prescription does is the prescription just stops me from going into withdrawal and to try and take part in life. However, it doesn't fix the inside. It doesn't fix the inside, so I'm still having to cope with life. I'm still having to cope. So as much as the prescription, whether it was methadone or whether it was Suboxone or whatever medication I was on, what I realised the days the medication was there. It was beneficial to an extent, but I was still having to deal with me. So I would get this sense when I wasn't with people, I was too lonely. I didn't want to be lonely, so I would go back and use illicitly again. And when I used illicitly again, what came with that was the guilt behind that, the shame with it, fear to face people again. So I was caught between a rock and a hard place. I wanted to be with the community in the recovery hub, but when I started to use, I didn't want to be like, oh, he's back using again. So it became that, and that was a 2-year struggle. Because I didn't know how to deal with the emotional side of things, and that was possibly why I found it difficult, because I didn't understand the internal turmoil that I was going through. So the 2 years, John he taught me a lot. How I practice my stuff today is a lot how John treated me. He was like a teacher. How he treated me. I used to say, John, I've used again and that, and he'd go, that's all right. You're an addict. That's what addicts do. I was always expecting to go, why, and point the finger, and what other people done. People were upset when I would use again. But John was never like that. That's all right. Just keep coming back, and I always talk about how John was always everywhere. No matter, he used to appear at bus stops and say, "You thought about treatment yet?" He used to ask me that all the time. And I used to say to people, if I opened a coffee jar, John's head would be in it, going, "You thought about treatment yet?" Because he was never pushy. Do you know what I mean? And he just gave me that time, which has allowed me to not force people that I work with today into doing things. Allow them to make their journey, but just be there with them. So that 2 years was difficult. It was because once I got to know where I was going, and the real information was what was happening inside of me, it was all related to childhood stuff. Once I started understanding all that, the recovery just opens up, and the mind opens up, and your mind opens to anything.
And obviously, you following on from that, you made that decision and you went to treatment, and you completed that program. And I'm guessing that was one of the most important elements. But for you, what has been the most important element for you in your recovery?
Relationships. If no point you go into rehab if you don't know how to have a relationship. I had to learn that in rehab. I've also had to learn that on the community rehab. And today, relationships is vital.
Yeah.
I talk about Kev being in a circle. I was in a circle with just me and a couple of others, dealers, folk I could get stuff off of, parents I could get stuff off of, but I didn't have people in there support-wise. So when I talk about my school, for instance, teachers never had relationships with them. I left school, became authority in prisons and social workers and police and anybody that shut an eye on really. Could not have a relationship with them. And in personal relationships, I couldn't have I tried to have them, I just didn't know how to have a proper relationship. So what recovery and key for me was how to have relationships today. And now I've built relationships up, now I've cleared up what's happened in my past. I have relationships with school teachers, relationships with prison staff in many prisons. I present at Tully Allen Peace College. I go and train peace on behaviour, how they look at people when they're going to people's doors, and I get to give that information over to cops. I get to give, so to do all that, I need to be able to have the relationships with people, which has led to amazing things. But the key for me is relationship.
Yeah. And I think as well, it's like, having that relationship, the relationships is dependent upon being able to have a relationship with yourself. That I've found for me, it's like building that relationship with myself, it's enabled me to then go on to have relationships with others, whether that be family members, friends, colleagues, and just people of the world. My next question would be, Kev, so throughout your recovery, have other behaviours or addictions popped up for you? And if so, like, how do you deal with them?
In recovery, what the main reason why you would probably want to use is because you can't handle the situation that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So as I go back to this internal turmoil, if I'm really, really angry and really, really upset, that's a danger, that's a red flag. That's a red flag. If I'm spending the day thinking about somebody too much because I've said or done, that's a red flag. That is a red flag. So as you just said there, it's about how do I have a relationship with me? How do I have a relationship? So having that relationship with me is how do I have a relationship with understanding what I'm feeling and what I'm understanding and no running with it. I have two, they talk about body, mind and spirit, right? So my body and mind clash because what I'm thinking through CBT skills and it's what I'm thinking creates an emotion in me. And how I think about people creates an emotion in me. So if I'm going about all day hating everybody, I feel terrible because I'm angry, I'm tense, I'm releasing the stress hormone cortisol into my body. I'm actually damaging myself. I'm actually infecting internal organs by releasing too much cortisol being under stress. So how do I look after me? How do I have a relationship? Maybe look after who I am, and that is about how I deal with life. So these are the triggers. Now, if I don't deal with the situations, and if I let that run, and this is just my own personal journey, if I let that run, then there's high chances if I cannot handle that intensity, the anger, rage, resentment, jealousy, I'll need to soothe that. And I've got tools to soothe it today, having that relationship with me. When we talk about recovery and we're in recovery, well, for me, I'm in recovery. We talk about recovered, and I'll always be recovering because I've got to keep an eye on me today, not just last year or last week or that. I've got to keep an eye on what's happening to me today. But for that wee boy who I was, I had to recover that. I had to find me again. That relationship with me again had to be recovered, and the definition of recovery is finding something that was lost. And I was lost years ago. And I lost myself trying to be everybody else but me. So for me, I recovered myself, but I need to stay recovered by recovering. It's a kind of paradox. Because if I think I'm recovered, I will sink back into losing again, and I'll lose me. If I'm not looking after something, I can lose it. and the only way I'll get it back is to recover it again. You know, so I need to keep a maintenance eye on what I don't want to lose in life. So for me, recovering is about how I stay recovering and looking after me. If not, I'll lose myself through thoughts, feelings, behaviours, and substances. I'll go into that ocean of addiction again, behaviour. So that's for me is what I talk about today is how do I look after me and how do I look at what's happening externally in my life. I don't look at what's happening externally, what's externally happening that's affecting me emotionally. You know?
Yeah, how the external affects the internally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So would you say that you have a routine, Kevin, that sustains your recovery?
Yeah. The routine, is for me is having this routine through the day, but along the routine goes self-discipline. So if, for instance, we're in the COVID, it's quite interesting this, right? I've watched a lot of people doing this, right? I actually done it myself. So COVID, we're shut down and all that stuff. I was in a routine. For some reason, something psychologically happened to men, right, including me, and I didn't shave. There was plenty of razors. Might not have been any toilet roll or sanitizer, but plenty of razors. For some reason, men stopped shaving and growing beards. And I started that. I had to catch that quickly when you're going to your routine. Aye, you're on lockdown. Aye, you're thinking, but why are you not shaving? Why is that? And so obviously, as you can see, I shave.
I was going to say, you're nice and clean shaven today.
But because I started slipping out my routine, and that my self-discipline is self-care, and making sure I wash, shave, and making sure I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, you know, these are routines. And if I decide not to shave, then I'm not going to shower, and then I'm going to skip breakfast. And what am I doing? I'm starting to go back to a behaviour. So this is personal to me. Like, I need to make sure that, regardless, I'm still going to take care of me, because then what I might see in the mirror is something I don't like, and that then creates me an internal turmoil. So, so structured. But I noticed in this lockdown and that a lot of guys have decided to grow beards and all that stuff, shave their hair and all that and stuff. Man, that's just a personal choice. But for me and my recovery, I've got to stick to discipline and routine, and that is looking after myself. I got on at night and looking at myself through the day, what's affecting me and what's bothering me. You know, just so that's an ongoing thing. But practice, and it's always a practice. I don't go through and say, I had a perfect day today, but I had the best day I possibly could. I wouldn't say I've had a perfect day any day, but I've had the best day possible because I've not hurt me, hurt anybody else, and I've not run about emotional pain all day.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're pretty self-disciplined in that area. But what would you say the things that you really can't do without?
I can't do without. Do you know, I think if you asked me that question a couple of years ago, I would have said, you know, that I needed material things. And in the recovery and in my journey, it's not what I've not got, it's what I accept what I have got. So I look at what I have got. There's nothing in life that I can just look at and say, I need this in my life today, and it's important than anything else. So there's no anything that I would say that's what's missing in my life today, or is there anything missing I would like. Because when I work on me, I'm grateful for my health, I'm grateful to be alive, and everything else is a bonus. You know what I mean? So.
How about in relation to your recovery, though? What are the things that you couldn't do without? What's most important for you in sustaining your recovery?
What's most important for me is sustaining my recovery. Again, I think relationships, I'll always keep hitting on relationships because isolation is, which a lot of people are doing now, is dangerous. So because of where we are today, I need to constantly be in contact with people. So I have people who are like my mentors or sponsors, as they talk about in the fellowship. I have more than one. I don't have one person. I have a handful of people for different reasons. And if something's bothering me, I can select and talk to. But at the same time, I also, at this time now, I've kind of been phoning people who are who I might think are on their own, or I might think they just need a chat. And do you know what? It's maybe a bit selfish, but it's really neat wanting to chat as well.
Yeah.
I'm doing more of that because it's, you know, because me supporting anybody really is actually helping me being able to do that. And that's what's probably, I think, right now is what's missing is that relationship. However, I've got my partner and my two daughters, so a bit of time in my hands there as well. You know.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say has been your high points, Kev, the high points of your recovery journey? I'm sure there's probably many, but if you can
Yeah,
give us a few.
Pam, you know, well, she, like 6 years ago, I struggled to walk into that recovery hub and mix with people. And, you know, even when I went to rehab, I was, you know, I had no confidence. And probably hadn't had confidence. I had to use a substance to get that confidence, because what blocked my confidence or blocked my esteem was that internal turmoil, or that internal disturbance was always there. So it didn't give me confidence to actually do anything. But then when I came on the journey of recovery, building relationships, starting with John back then, and finding somebody who showed me a form of compassion. See, compassion is probably the key for anybody. If you want to support anybody, you've got to have compassion, empathy. You've got to, you know, and that's what John showed me. And then that went through there on the journey. And then the highlights came when I was asked to do a presentation, public speaking. And I was like, what? But I was passionate. I was passionate about what I was wanting to talk about. I was passionate about aiding and abetting and what we were doing. I was passionate. So risks a good thing, good risks. Get your comfort zone, take a risk every day, do something you wouldn't normally do. That was part of it as well. And I went and done a presentation. It was so well received that I then been given many highlights now where I've been invited to most universities in Edinburgh, Middlesex University. You know, I was a guy who was kicked out of school, and now I'm going into universities now to get teaching or pass information on, which is teaching, right? You know, I've been flown up and down the country. I've been sent over to Belfast to trauma conferences. You know, I've spoke at Easter Road Football Stadium, Celtic Park. I've spoke at the National Rugby Stadium at Murrayfield on 4 or 5 occasions. Never saw a rugby match, but I've been at the stadium doing presentations. And you know, these have been cracking highlights, because for me, you know, I'm getting to go to places, I'm getting to talk about recovery, I'm getting to promote recovery, I'm getting to promote not just about substance misuse, but inequality, poverty, child neglect, child trauma, and I feel that I've been gifted with an ability to do that. And so these have been great highlights. I've been involved with an army project where I've been away with the army, looking after young people. I've been involved in the Edinburgh Royal Military Tattoo. You know, there's been many highlights in my life. I've been invited onto TV studios like to discuss situations, you know, what to do with Free Scotland and the preventative work, because there's various projects within that as well. So there's many highlights in my life, but even though that sounds good and it sounds exciting, I have got to keep myself grounded as well. And not let the ego come in and think that I'm something special, anything but. But at the end of the day, these are great things. It's great to go to these events. It's a great feeling after it. But I still need to keep myself grounded to who I am today.
Yeah. And you find you ever just sometimes have to kind of pinch yourself because of all the years that you spent in addiction and in the chaos for what is a relatively short amount of time in recovery compared to all the years, you know, and all the stuff that you have done. Do you find you're just yourself just being mind blown about the stuff that you've achieved?
Do you know, Pam, I suffer, yeah, I think you've probably heard it, imposter syndrome, where I feel that I shouldn't be there, that I get back to that wee schoolboy again. I've got to battle with that and think, I'm on stage speaking after the world-renowned child psychologist, Dr. Bruce Perry, American. You know, I'm on stage after speaking after psychiatrists and psychologists, and all these guys are on stage talking, and I'm up next to talking. I'm going, I'm no worth. These guys are all, and that's a battle. That's a battle to do that before I speak. But see, after I speak, I certainly do push myself and go, wow, I enjoyed that, because it's what I feel for an audience. Because as somebody who couldn't walk into a room and actually be involved with 6 people, and I'm standing on a podium with 400 to an audience, that's a massive achievement, personal achievement for me to be able to do that. That shows the esteem, and it's doable for anybody to do. When you have a passion for life and you have a passion for others, and you have, you know, that going out and being able to be given a platform to speak about this, to speak about recovery, to speak about trauma, poverty, you know, inequality, do you know that being given a platform, I do pinch myself, and it's great stuff, you know.
And is there anything that you remember about people giving you bits of advice? If there was one bit of advice that you were given throughout your journey that kind of sticks in your mind, is there anything that you can remember that you would say to somebody now? You maybe didn't think about the relevance of it at the time, and maybe thought when somebody said it to you, what does that even mean? But it's not till many years later you think, oh, right, okay, now I get that.
Yep. I'll go back to John, who says to me, Kev, come into recovery, get recovered. And I think back to what he was meaning was find yourself again. So he wasn't saying this directly, but now I look back on it. What he says to me, Kev, see if you come in, see if you join us in this recovery hub and follow the leaders, look at who's shining, look who inspires you, follow the people that you see, doors will open for you. And I'll never forget that when he says doors will open for you. And ever since that, I've had nothing but doors open. I've had doors close, but you know what? Because I've moved on to the next door. And these many doors, and you know what, Pam? There's been stuff that's been offered to me for next year, obviously, because COVID didn't go. I've been offered to go out and do other stuff in my recovery, which allows me to go even wider. You know, I try not to control anything in the day. It's just because when I come in, I just accept what life is at me. Sometimes I have bad days, and you know what? It's a teaching for me. But I'll never forget that saying when John says to me, doors will open for you if you come in the recovery, if you do the right things. And for what I've done in doing the right things and being privileged to help and support others, I've been awarded in abundance. And I mean rewarded in abundance with life. You know, no cash, no material things. What I have internally today couldn't put a price tag on it. Nobody could buy it. You know what I mean? And that's it.
Well, so apart from you know that how you feel internally, what's like the other things that make you happy today?
Probably with my daughters. That's like they're just they're probably my best teachers today. And my daughters show me what forgiveness is. They show me how to know how to resentment. Kids are amazing. Kids just let things go. They just don't. Kids let things go. They're just amazing. That brings me joy, so much joy. You know, supporting others and actually seeing their journey unfold and them moving on with their lives is amazing. Just the simple wee things that you see in people who struggled with their relationships themselves and never thought anything was recoverable, such as speak to their peers again, such as getting a job again, maybe even coming off the street and getting into a hostel, or even moving to the hostel into their own property, going into training, these are the things that just, you know, I always say to boys who like to volunteer with Aid and Abet, because it is a volunteering charity organisation, great stepping stone. But I always say to the guys, when you come here and you volunteer, right, you'll get a feeling that no other drug on the planet has ever gave you. And the great thing about this feeling, it lasts a long time. You know, so because it's and that's the abundance, that's the reward, what you get when you just see somebody changing. So they're the great things for me, you know, out there, and obviously in the home.
And who would you say inspires you?
Who inspires me?
Or who's, or what? Is it who or what's inspired your recovery? Who inspires you now?
Do you know, I read a lot of stuff now, but what's inspiring to me is people who have the courage to reach out and say, I'm struggling. That takes courage. That's inspiring to me. Inspires me when I see how people are changing. I believe there's a big shift going on. I do believe that there's a great, you know, there's many services out there today who are providing great work for people which wasn't there when I was younger. Do you know? And there's more unity and community happening as well. Unfortunately, through lockdown, that's possibly not as tight, but yet here's what we're doing now. We're all jumping on Zoom meetings and we're having meetings and we're still encouraging relationships because humans are designed to be connected. Human touch, you know, for you're born, it's all about human connection and about that. And now, because of lockdown, that's not happening as such. We all need a hug, we all need to be there. And so now, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to transfer our skills into other things to keep that communication going. I think that's why social media and electronic devices and all that are all absolutely, you know, what's needed right now until we come through what's happening. You know?
Yeah, it's been an absolute godsend for most folk that were able to use this as a platform for communicating with others, which actually, talking about that, you know, talking about the current climate and the situation as it stands, Kev, just with everything that's going on with COVID-19, how would you say you're looking after your mental health? Like, what are the kind of things that you're doing just to keep your mental health in check and keep you feeling as good as you can?
Yeah, so I'm sitting here talking and telling you how I feel right now. So that's where I'm now. There's not nothing. But because just to kind of put in a picture, Pam, I was on lockdown in January before the COVID stuff came high because I've had an operation done. So I've actually been in crutches for January. I got my plaster off on Monday. So I was doing the lockdown thing anyway. I've not left the house. A couple of people did come in cars to pick me up, take me for coffee up the street. But that's been it. But apart from that, I've just been doing the lockdown thing. And so even through that process, I've been having a medical surgery done, which keeps you in the house, or the lockdown, it will affect anybody's mental health. And for me, I can have days where I can slip into, this is murder. I'm bored. I've got to catch that. Got to catch that. So don't think I'm going through every day. It's like, oh, happy, and that, because that's where I need to use my tools. And then, you know, for me, I've done it more today than I've ever done because of me being in plaster and all that for January, is waking up and just hitting on gratitude that I'm actually alive. Do you know what I mean? Opening my eyes and knowing that somebody did me open my eyes this morning. Do you know what I mean? My feet touching the floor, knowing that maybe somebody there who's never had just touched the floor for whatever reasons. Do you know, I practice that every day in the morning. Be grateful to be alive and be excited about the day ahead. This is why I talk about acceptance, joyfulness, and enthusiasm. You know, that's a mantra for me. You know, accept what every day I can bring joy into the life, and just for me, and then and be enthusiastic about the day. I split my days up, you know, and I stick to my routine, like the shaving and the, you know, I stick to that, I discipline that, and I'll do different things. For instance, I maybe spend time at the back myself, because it's good to be with myself even though I've locked in, and then I spend time with my kids. I might read a book. I do writing, so I write stuff. So I'm kind of structured that way, and making sure I have dinner at tea time. I stick to the time structures of what I'm normally doing the other day, so it's important to have those time structures. I'd probably be doing more now than what I would have done if there wasn't a lockdown or I was in plaster and stuff like that. And I don't know if anybody else who watches this will find that I've actually have to take stock of it, but I found that even though I'm on lockdown, the days and weeks are coming in really fast.
Yep.
The other day there, it was Monday, it's Friday morning.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason for that. I'm not going to get into that, but there's a reason for that happens. So if you feel the days are coming in fast, even if you're in lockdown, you're on the right path. That's all to say. And I feel that if a lot of people actually look now at what's happening, and they'll find that it's expected to be really long days. But I think maybe it's just due to my structure. That it was Monday, like yesterday, and the date's Friday, and I'm enjoying that. So it's about structure. It's about being able to understand it. It's about catching that up here. That's probably the biggest killer in a sense. It'll take you away, hijack you if you let these thoughts run. And I suppose I'm sure people would identify with that. The fact that thinking can take you, you know.
So you find it's really important for you to keep that structure, even though you're maybe not doing what you would do normally on a day-to-day basis if this wasn't happening.
Yeah, because you're distracted on the outside. So if I was going to work this morning, I'd be in my car, go to the train station, on the train, I'd go to the police station where I work, I'd go in there, we find out what we're doing for the day, and I'm out and about, and I'm busy. In lockdown, you're left with yourself, as in even though you've got your partner, your kids, but there's a lot of people there who are left themselves, left in there thinking, maybe sick of watching the same programme. So I think about, trying to do something different. Can you phone 5 people a day? Can you think about other people who might be in the same boat as you that you can talk to? Is there people out there you can phone? Who have no phone through? Well, is there family? Is there a relative? And see if there's no, phone somebody and tell them that you want support. You know, because there's plenty support out there today for people, for anybody who's struggling with mental health, which will be, I mean, this is going to have an impact on everybody for years to come, not just what's happening now. You know, that we need to be all aware of that.
Yeah, and you're talking about books there and reading and stuff. So for myself and maybe the people watching, have you got any recommendations, Kev? Any good books that you've read?
Yeah, yeah. So here's one. I got to meet this guy.
Yeah.
The boy that keeps the store. This is Bezel Vanderkolk. I got the privilege of meeting that man in Belfast, along with Gabor Mate. That was at a trauma conference, and you know, and these guys are the experts in the field. But when I read this book, I get to understand me. This is why I can talk about the internal, the brain development, the you know, I re-educated myself and all this stuff. You know, I've read some really brilliant books, but the thing about these books is they're not just to be read once. You know, you need to go back and read them again. It's like when you listen to a record, or you listen to music, and you hear it, and oh, I quite like that. You hear it again, maybe after about 6 times, you then to start understand there's a story within that song, and you start to get it. Or you watch a movie and you think, oh, it's a great movie that, and then you watch it a second time, you go, oh, is that who that is? And then you start making links and connections. So what happens with us guys is we sometimes rush through life, and that's what I'm saying, practice is practice, and sometimes I've read that book 4 times, I'm reading it again, and it doesn't, because stuff pops out to me that I've never caught, or it never, what did it mean to me then? So and I would always say, like, I read a book, try and read 2 or 3 at one time, but I don't mean like, but you could put what I'm doing if you get bored with it and pick something else up. You know, there's great stuff on books. I can't write the names off the top of my head, Pam, but I've got a few. It's Audible books that I listen to a lot. I read, but I like listening to books. I like everybody's different skills. They taking things in through visual or stuff like that. I discovered that because I wasn't a good reader. So I can read, but I wasn't a very good reader, and I wasn't good at taking a lot of stuff in. But I found if I listen, so I listen through my earphones and I listen to Audible books, which, yeah, and I think that's key as well, because a book can take you away, do you know?
Yeah. And well, that's us just about done, Kev. Do you know what? It's been really interesting. It's been fascinating talking to you. Is there any other things that you would like to add? You know, have you got any projects coming up? Are you doing any pieces of work? Is there any pieces of work that inspires you that you want to mention?
You know, I think the projects that we've got. So I work with a project called Turn Your Life Around. So going back to when I was in prison, when I got the CBT stuff at prison, I was so, like, a lot of things opened my mind, gradually opened my mind, and I mind always saying that I wanted to do in prison. I was saying, you know, I need to take this stuff out of schools, or I'd love to take this stuff out of schools and speak to the business staff about it. I want to go into schools and talk about this stuff, and they said, like, Kev, you will never get to work in schools, mate. You're a drug addict and you're a criminal in prison. Your past portfolio only get you into schools, so that became a purpose for me. That's my favourite purposes and that stuff. And then the day I'm working in schools, you know, I get to go through the project. And I actually working, which I'll not mention, but the names of the schools, but actually going to schools where kids are not allowed in mainstream due to their behaviour. So just at the end of last year there, I was working in 2 schools with kids and having relationships with them and chatting with these young guys and who are in care homes and lost parents at a young age and trauma in them. I have a great relationship with them. So that's been great. That's one of the projects called Turn Your Life Around. I've been involved in with the schools. With the Police Scotland project, we work with 16 to 25-year-olds, which is prevention and early intervention. And then we have the Threshold project, which is, you know, the drug-related deaths in Scotland, which is the highest in Europe. And we work with a project where we try and reach out to guys and get them into services and direct them to services and that. So they're projects that have been really, really exciting to be involved in. You know, I will say this, we're on the project, possibly Europe. I did say the world, but somebody says there is another project. I don't think there is until they tell me, but we're on the project in Europe where we have police and former criminals working together side by side to help make a difference in reducing crime, because we know that locking people up doesn't work. You can't punish people into recovery. You can't punish people out of crime. You just can't punish them because they've been punished all their lives anyway. So these projects we've shown that it's, but rather than try to punish people and lock people up because of behaviour, give them a chance. They've not had a good chance in life, and we could give them a good chance. So these projects which is great, you know what I mean? And yeah, I love that. And I'm actually in the process of writing a book now. So I've been doing that as part of another. It was actually a project, and I was asked many times when I go and do presentations at universities and stuff or anywhere, and I do a Q&A session, somebody in the audience would always say, "You're not going to write a book." And I would go, "No."
So is it like an autobiography?
Yeah, it's about the journey, and it's all what I'm talking about now. I'm writing down about all what I'm speaking about now. It's been therapeutical for me. Discovered a few things even while writing that. But writing it, but again, it's all based on that relationship and what happens to kids when there's no relationship there. And what happened with me through my life and my journey, and the behaviours that came up, and then the result of that. And the countless people that I grew up alongside who are no longer here today, you know, which is quite shocking when I look back and I talk about, because we can sometimes forget, and I look at the amount of people who die prematurely due to the result of childhood trauma, which led to addiction, which led to mental health and suicide and overdose. You know, when I'm writing this, I'm seeing that. I wouldn't write about any individuals as in part of the book that I'm writing, but I recognise that some of the people I'm writing about, oh, he's not here anymore, she's not here anymore, all at young ages, you know what I mean? So it's been quite revealing in that as well. But again, it's just evidence in the fact that there is an opportunity to prevent young people going into the criminal justice system, into the mental health system, into, you know what I mean? And it takes a collective society to do that.
Well, you'll need to keep us posted about that, Kev. You'll need to keep us posted. So that's us for today. I want to thank you on behalf of myself and the West Lothian Recovery Service for joining us and for agreeing to do this, Kev. It's been really interesting. I'm sure everybody that's watching it will think the same. You take care, and thanks again. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks for having me on as well. And I just wish everybody well. Stay strong, stay connected, and get more people in your circle. Thanks.
Thanks, Kev. We'll see you all later. Bye.
Bye.